Good morning, scholars. Today we're going to visit the opposite end of the genre spectrum from Homer's Iliad by looking at the opening of Aristotle's Ethica Nicomachean, that is, the Nicomachean Ethics. We're going to look at Book 1, Chapter 1, that is 1094a, lines 1 through 18, wherein every rational activity aims at some end or good, and one end, like one activity, may be subordinate to another. So here we go. If folks would like to see more work on Aristotle and philosophy in general, please become a financial supporter on Patreon and let your money do your talking, and I will begin to devote more energies in this direction. So, Nicomachean Ethics, Chapter 1, Book 1. Passa techne, kai passa methodos. Homoioste, praxis te kai proairesis. Agatou tenos, epiestai doke. Dio, kalos apepenanto, tagaton, hu, pant, epietai. I'll read that again. Passa techne, kai passa methodos, homoios de praxis te kai proairesis, agatou tenos epiestai doke. Dio kalos apepenanto, tagaton, hu, pant, epietai. So for vocabulary here, techne, methodos, praxis, proairesis, epieme in the middle, and doke. So techne is a craft, a skill, a system or method of making or doing something. A methodos, feminine, is a scientific method, an investigation, or mode of inquiry. Praxis, praxeos, feminine, is an activity, an action, a business, or a doing. Proairesis, feminine, is a choosing of one thing over another, a deliberate choice with purpose. Epieme, in the middle, means to aim at, and it takes a genitive object. Doke is our very common impersonal expression, it seems, which will take the infinitive construction as its subject. So, passa techne, kai passa methodos, homoios de, praxis te kai proairesis, agatou tenos epiestai doke. Now, the homoios de is Aristotle's way of saying similarly. So, passa techne, kai passa methodos, homoios de, praxis te kai proairesis, agatou tenos, epiestai doke. So here he mentions four things which in every enactment of their of themselves, agatou tenos, epiestai doke. Dio, kalos, apepenanto, tagaton, hu, pant, epietai. So did wherefore, on which account, therefore. Kalos, here an adverb, is beautifully, well, or nobly. apepenanto. Here, the middle is used like the active, and Thompson translates this as has been defined, but here apopino, in the middle, like I say, means to define. And the subject here is people generally or philosophers generally. Now, this is a very good example where if one is going to read Aristotle, like if one is going to read Attic Tragedy, you need to have the big, fat $220 Liddell and Scott dictionary, because this definition of apopino in the middle, meaning defined, comes very last in the entry, where finally he picks up Aristotle. That is to say, it will not be found in the intermediate size dictionary. Epimi in the middle means to aim at, and it takes a genitive object. So, dio kalos apepenanto tagaton. And of course, tagaton is to agaton, the good. Hu pant epietai. As that thing at which everything aims. Diapora de tis painetai ton telon. Tamen gar esi in ergeai. Tade par autas erga tena. Now, so our vocabulary we need here, diapora is a difference or a distinction. Telos is an end accomplished, the completion or fulfillment of anything. So what's the purpose of something? And ergeia is an activity. Ergon, neuter, is that which is wrought or made by an activity, that is to say, the product of an activity. So here, the men and de, tamen, tade, is going to make a very important distinction. Diapora de tis painetai ton telon. Okay, there seems to be some difference among ends, and you have tamen, tade. Tamen gar esi energeai, tade par autas erga tena. Now, what Aristotle is pointing to here would have been a commonplace in the conversations of philosophers in Athens and elsewhere of this time. And if you look at Plato's Republic, 357 BC, where he defines or delineates the three types of goods, the three types of things desired, you can see this distinction in a more clear form. So let's just read that bit of the Republic in translation. And this is the opening of Book 2, of course. At this point, I thought I'd be exempt from further talking, but apparently this was only a preamble, and this, of course, refers to Book 1 of the Republic. You see, it's not in Glaucon's nature to cut and run from anything, and on this occasion he refused to accept Thrasymachus's capitulation, but said, Socrates, do you want us really to be convinced that in all circumstances morality is better than immorality, or merely to pretend to be convinced? If it were up to me, I replied, I'd prefer your conviction to be genuine. And here comes the distinctions. Well, Glaucon remarked, your behavior is at odds with your wishes, then. I mean, here's a question for you. Don't you describe as good something which is welcomed for its own sake, rather than because its consequences are desired. Okay? So the consequences are what Aristotle is here calling tatela. I mean, don't you describe as something as good, something which is welcome for its own sake, whether because its consequences are desired. Enjoyment, for instance, and all those pleasures which are harmless and whose future consequences are only enjoyable. Yes, I agreed. Good seems to me the right description for that situation. Here's a second. And what about things which are welcome, not just for their own sakes, but also for their consequences? Intelligence, sight, and health, for instance, are evidently welcomed for both reasons, for both their own sakes and for their consequences. We desire intelligence, sight, and health. Yes, I said. And isn't there, in your experience, he asked, a third category of good things? The category in which we find exercise, medical treatment, and any money-making job like being a doctor? All these things are regarded as nuisances, but beneficial, and are not welcome for their own sake, but for their financial rewards and other consequences. Yes, I agreed. There is this third category as well. What of it? To which category do you think morality belongs? He asked. In my opinion, I replied, it belongs to the best category, the category which anyone who expects to be happy should welcome, both for its own sake and for its consequences. And it's thus that we begin Plato's Book 2 of the Republic. So anyone who would have heard this lecture of Aristotle would be knowledgeable of this distinction between things that are desirable or considered good because as activities as such, and things that are considered good because of their results or consequences or products. So this is what is being pointed to here with diapora de tis parnetai ton telon, ta mengar esi in ergeai, ta de par autas erga tina. Hon, desi, tele, tina, paratas praxes, in tutois, beltio pepuke, ton energeon ta erga. So here, praxis is action or activity. Beltio stands for beltiona as our neuter plural of the comparative of agathos, better, more valuable, superior. Pepuke is to be so-and-so by nature, and ergon is the product, what is wrought or made as a result of an activity. So he says, hon desi ta tele tina para tas praxes. So of those goods where there is or are some consequences or products beside the activity themselves. In tutois, belti o pepuke ton ergeon ta erga. So here we have to remember our genitive, the way our genitive of comparative gets used. In these cases, the results or the products are by nature better than ton ergeon. Okay, so now we begin with the genitive absolute. Polon de praxeon uson, kai technon, kai epistemon, pola, gignetai, kai, ta, tela. And in that last line, kai ta tela, we want to translate kai as also. So, polon de praxeon uson, ta kai teknon kai epistemon, pola gignetai kai ta tele. So, an episteme is refers to knowledge or science. We can translate the plural as fields of study. And the rest of this is the vocabulary for the next section, so don't worry about that. Here we only need epistemon as fields of studies. Polon de praxeon uson, kai teknon kai epistemon, pola gignetai kai ta tele. And remember that Aristotle uses gignetai really as an equivalent of a form of the verb to be. So many are also the ends or products. And here we go. I.3K is the medical science. Naupegia is the art of shipbuilding. Oikonomike is domestic economy. And Plutos is wealth. So here we have these genitives will all be the comparative genitive. Iatrikes men ga hugiea. Now pegikes de ploion. Strategikes de nike. Oikonomikes de Plutos. Okay, so he's saying that health, the end or product of being a doctor, is better or preferable to doctoring itself, and is the end thereof. A boat, ploion, is the end of shipbuilding. Nike, victory, is the end of military science. And wealth, Plutos, is the end of economics or domestic economy. So, iatrikes men ga hugiea, now pegikes de ploion, strategikes de nike, oikonomikes de Plutos. Now for this next bit, dunamis is a faculty, capacity, or power. Mian, of course, is our accusative feminine of eis mia hen, meaning one. Kataper, even as, just as. He uses this to introduce comparative clauses. Hippike is horsemanship or the skill of riding a horse. Kali no poike is bridle making. And an organon, neuter, is a tool or an instrument. So, hosai, desi, ton toyuton. And when he says hosoi, desi, ton toyuton, however many are of this type, and he means where there is a product related to a activity. Hosoi, desi, ton toyuton, hupo mia, tena, dunamen. Kataper, hupoten, hipikein, kal lino poikein. Kai hosoi, alai, ton hippikon, organon esi. So, however many are of this sort, that is to say, coming under one capacity or power, hupomian tena dunamen, kata per, hupoten hi bikein, kalino poike, like bridle making is under horsemanship, and hosoi alai ton hippikon organon esi. So he's saying that you imagine all the equipment one needs to support riding and training horses. Well, all of those tools and all of those even activities are under the direction of hipike, of horsemanship itself. Hautai de kai pasai, polemike praxis, hupotain strategikein, kataton auton de thropon, alai hup heteros. Now, polemikos, of course, is of or for war. Strategike is the science of generalship or military strategy. And propos is a mode, fashion, or method. So kata ton auton de propon is just in the same way, indeed. Okay, so altai de kai pasai, polemike praxis, hupotain strategikein. Now, he's kind of made a leap here because he's imagining that you had bridle making under horsemanship, but he sees horsemanship as being part of military art. Okay, so it is part of polemike praxis, and that is on top of that, or directing that, is strategy. So we have, so he set up this four-fold ranking thing of, strategy or generalship at the top, war practice beneath that, horsemanship beneath that, and bridle making even beneath that. So you just have to understand that because he's speaking with his sense of the way the Greek polis works and the defensive capabilities of the Greek polis, he's not thinking of horsing around in the way we think about it. It's a vital part of war and of statecraft, ultimately. So, hautai de kai pasai polemike praxis, hupotain strategikein, kataton auton de tropon, alai hup heteros. And in the same manner, other practices are beneath other practices. So this is his setting up of the conception he's trying to present. So in hapasais de ta ton architectonicon tele panton esten hieretotera ton hup auta tuton gar karen kakena dioketai. So in hapasais de ta ton architectonicon tela panton. Okay. So ta tela, the ends of the most architectonic, or of the most guiding architectonicon, panton, esten, hieretotera, tone, hup, auton. So this tone is again our genitive of comparison, and we see a good example of how the article can work to substantize anything. So the tone, hup, auton are more preferable than those beneath them. Tuton gar karen, and so karen follows the genitive for even kai ekena, even those are pursued for the sake of those other ones, or these are pursued for the sake of those. So he's saying that you don't pursue bridle making independently of horsemanship. You don't pursue horsemanship independently of military arts. You don't pursue military arts independent of strategy, and ultimately you don't pursue strategy or large-scale economics independently of politics. So this is his setup for making politics the most architectonicon of, or architectonique, of all techne. However that may be. So this wonderful adjective, architectonique, refers to a master art or science, and one needs to supply techne or episteme, i.e. that which prescribes to all those beneath it, as an architecton to his workmen. So he is imagining, like on a site, where the architect comes on and he tells the general contractor, he tells the carpenters, he tells the plumbers, he directs all their action because he has the highest vision of what everything else needs to be doing. So this is the notion of this architectonique, techne, or episteme. So hieretoteros is comparative of hieretos, and preferred or preferable, of course, more preferable than, because it's a comparative, so we'll take the genitive. And karen, for the sake of, following the genitive, and dioko is to pursue. So in hapasais de ta ton architectonicon tele panton, esten hieretotera ton hupauta, tuton ga karen, ka kena dioketai. Okay, so of course there's a heck of a lot going on there, and this is, one of the most, celebrated bits of Aristotle as the first book in general. So he concludes, diapere duden, tas energeas altas enai, ta tele ton praxeon, e para altas alote, kata per epiton lecteson epistemon. So, diapere duden. Basically, that means it makes no difference. It differs not at all. Diapere duden. Tas energias altas. That these activities, whether they are tatela ton praxion, e para tautas aloti. That is, whether they are the results of the activities, or whether the ends are activities, okay, whether the activities themselves, the energia, are the ends of the activities, of the actions, or whether the ends are something other beyond those. So he's going back to that distinction between consequences and activities, and going back to that distinction between, say wealth and economy, boats and shipbuilding. And that's why he says, "Katha per epiton lecteson epistemon." Lectes, of course, being the aorist passive participle of lego, to say or mention. So ton lecteson, the aforementioned. So kata per epi, or kata per as in the case of ton lecteson epistemon, of the previous fields of study. Okay, so again, pasa techne kai pasa methodos, homoios de praxis te kai proiresis, agatu tenos et biestai doke. Dio, kalos, apepenanto tagaton, hu, pant, et bietai. Diapora de tis painetai ton telon, ta mengar esi energiae, ta de para altas erga tena. Hon desi tela tena para tas praxes, in tutois, beltio pepuke ton en ergeon ta erga. Polon de praxeon uson, kai technon, kai epistemon, pola gignetai, kai ta tele. Iatrikes menga hugieia, naupegikes de ploion, strategikes de Nike, oikonomikes de Plutos. Hosai desi ton toiuton, hupomian tena dunamen, katapea hupoten hipikein, kalinopoike, kai hosai alai ton hipikon organon esen, autai de kai pasa polemike praxis, hupo ten strategikein, gata ton auton de tropon alai hup heteros. So there we go. It's most certainly not easy thought. It's most certainly not easy Greek. But the only way to be able to function, to really understand Aristotle or Plato, is in and through the Greek. So I welcome the philosophers who might be coming on board, and I appeal to you to become Patreon supporters and let your voice be heard that you'd like more work with Aristotle and ultimately with Plato. So have a good day, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Goodbye.